Jesus talks about two very distinct categories. He talks about salt and light. And salt as being distinct. Salt gives its flavor, gives flavor to the food, enhances the flavor. Salt helps to preserve. And I was looking at salt. I'm going to talk about light mostly today, but I did find one thing. I was looking at this thing about salt that I thought you might find interesting. When it says it loses its saltiness, the word there in the original language, which is Greek, becomes moronic. So somehow the idea of being moronic usually means foolish, ignorant, naive, lost of knowledge, but when it's applied to salt, it means loses its saltiness. So we start off the sermon by saying, don't be a moron. And and Jesus tells us, you are salt. Jesus tells us, you are light. Now, long ago and far away, when I was younger, so much younger than today, I used to go camping with a friend after Friday nights at work. We'd hike up into the hills and camp. And there was this place where we'd meet up, and I was a little late one day getting there, and so it was getting dark when I strapped on my pack and climbed up the hill and through the woods and made my way along the ridge line. There wasn't really a trail back to where our campsite was, and as I entered into the woods, it was completely dark, and it's amazing how lonely and scary the woods are when it's completely pitch black. And these are, back east woods, which are very dense and entangled, and you're ducking under branches and crawling around trees and get your pack hooked on something. And just thinking about what a lonely, dark, and empty place it was until I saw the light. And then that changed everything. As soon as I could see the light of the campfire, everything around felt different. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't know if there's anything in all the world more inviting and comforting than a campfire in a dark wood. Just as soon as I could see that, I felt that. And I think that that's part of what Jesus is talking to us about. You are the light of the world. It is a dark place, it is a somewhat scary place, and people are wandering around in the trees trying to find a place of refuge. And if they can see you and see my presence in you, Jesus is saying, if they can see my presence in you, it will draw them like an oasis, like a refuge from the darkness that is encroaching all around. You are the light of the world, and light can't help but shine. It just can't help but shine. I heard a couple of encouraging words about what God is doing among us this week. One source reported that the neighborhood is beginning to feel like a different place. That as we've begun worshiping here, that there's a sense of peace and safety that's spreading out. And I think that's an awesome thing. As we lift up our praises to God, we're like the sticks of wood being brought together to form a campfire, and the glory goes up to God, and the radiance and glory of God comes down on us and goes out into the community. Light shines, and light changes its context. Light changes the world around us. And because of God's grace among us, we are being a light to our community. Thanks be to God. And we rejoice in that. Someone else told me that they were talking to a friend who asked her, what is it with your church? And, you never know where that kind of a question's going to go. But it was positive. And said, what do you mean? He said, well, I've heard from one person and then from another and then from another all the, about your church. And there's this excitement about it. And she answered, well, we're just a place, a group of people that genuinely love God and genuinely love one another. And that's light in action, isn't it? I mean, that's the way light looks in the sphere of relationships. A people who love each other in spite of their differences, in spite of our idiosyncrasies, in spite of difference in preferences, in spite of difference in politics. We are people who love one another and are passionately devoted to one another to the point of making sacrifices for the sake of one another. And that gets noticed. The world in which we live is desperately longing to see what real love looks like. They really are. They've been told it's this, and they've been told it's that, and a lot of what's advocated is that the greater the sexual activity you're having, the more love you have. And that's really come up as an empty, dry well for a lot of people. And so there's this longing. Other people have said that satisfaction is found in accumulating possessions and place in society. But people are looking for genuine light, for genuine love in action. And the way that you love one another, listen, is the most powerful witness to Christ that you can give. Jesus said that they will know we're Christians by the way we love one another. They'll know that the Father sent me because you guys are able to love one another. Because really, I mean, how could we possibly love one another without the grace of God, right? I mean, if you know me at all, you know it takes a lot of grace. My wife, is total sainthood. So, Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and sticks it under a bushel basket. They put it on its lampstand and it lamps its light throughout the whole house. It's pointless to generate light and then to hide it, isn't it? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and I want us to think about this for a minute. The prime directive in our current culture and milieu seems to be this: don't offend anyone. Have you noticed? All someone has to say, well, that's offensive to me, and it gets outlawed or something, and unless it's something Christian, unless someone who's a Christian says that's offensive. There's a lot of confusion about morality. And Christians, I agree that Christians shouldn't be obnoxious. I mean, the world has enough obnoxious people without us adding to it. But I also think that when there's darkness, there needs to be light. And there are some areas where there's a lot of confusion about what is true and what's not true. I think that, again, as I say, in the current discussion of sexual morality in our society and sexuality, human sexuality, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of arguments, a lot of vitriol. And I will say this, that Christians ought to be the most loving people toward everyone, anywhere. And here's the important distinction I want to make sure we understand. It is possible to love someone without necessarily agreeing with their behavior. Do you know what I'm saying? And the rules of the argument in culture have sort of implied that if you love someone, you agree with their behavior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to not agree with their behavior. So, Christians, you are the light of the world, and it's okay to have moral positions on things. I think another unfortunate thing that's happened is the whole discussion of human sexuality has been kind of morphed into a human rights issue, which has caused us, I think, to lose focus on some other very critical human rights issues. Again, I say, it's possible to disagree with someone's behavior without loving them any less. When you had children growing up, were there ever times you disagreed with their behavior? Because my children never, ever did anything that I disagreed with. Nor did I ever. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is just agree with someone in a loving way. In a loving way. But yeah, no, I mean, there was talk in the Olympics about certain things that are being called human rights issues, and so I did some research. Did you know that in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, in 2012, there were 175,000 women sold into sexual slavery in 1 year. 175,000, not counting children. The former Soviet bloc is second only to Southeast Asia in human trafficking. These are issues that we ought to care about. We read that in Isaiah, right? These are some important things. And so I just pray that in the current cultural conversation that some of these terrible, tragic, horrible realities aren't overlooked. And Christians, we who are followers of Christ, believers in God's Word, are to care about the poor, are to care about the homeless. I had the neatest experience yesterday, and it doesn't sound like, if it sounds like bragging, I don't think it is, because you're not supposed to brag, but it was something I got to do that was real fun. So I was driving home from here yesterday afternoon, and it was raining, thank God, and wind was blowing, and I was coming across the bridge, and I saw a guy walking up the bridge. And I just felt that thing where you need to give him a ride. And so I went down, made a U-turn, came back, and picked him up. And his name was Myron, and he works at the Papa Murphy's over in Yuba City, and he lives over in East Marysville. And he was walking home in the rain. And listen, that was such a tiny, insignificant, took me maybe 10 minutes most. But I felt really awesome. Just helping this guy who's trying his best to work his job and walks miles to work and back again, whose wife is disabled. It was awesome to invest in someone who needed help. That is a blessing. That is a blessing. And part of what we're doing, this week, we're having on Friday an outreach to the community. We're inviting folks in to watch a movie and make cookies and try to have some fun together for Valentine's Day. And so we're reaching out. Little things where we impact others in the name of Christ with the love of Christ is profoundly wonderful. And it's precisely what light does. You are the light of the world. The fact that the world is getting darker should not intimidate you in the least, but give you great confidence that the light of Christ shines in you brightly and is desperately needed. Shine, church, in the name of Christ. Thanks be to God. Amen.